My name is Madison Carter. I'm 29 years old. And even now, months later, I still remember the exact moment my entire future changed. It wasn't a dramatic betrayal. There wasn't another woman standing in my living room. There wasn't a screaming match. There wasn't even a breakup. Just a text message. A single text message that landed on my phone on a quiet Tuesday afternoon and shattered everything I thought I knew about the man I loved. 3 weeks earlier, my life had felt stable, predictable, safe. Ethan Reynolds and I had been together for almost 2 years. We had spent months talking about moving in together. We toured apartments, compared neighborhoods, discussed budgets, argued about whether we needed a second bedroom. All the normal conversations couples have when they're building a future. At least, that's what I thought we were doing. I thought we were building something. Apparently, Ethan thought he was still shopping. I was sitting at my desk when my phone vibrated. His name appeared on the screen. I smiled automatically. Then I opened the message, "Madison, we need to talk." My stomach immediately tightened. The next line was worse. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. And before we take a big step, like moving in together, I feel like I need to explore other options. I need to be sure. I hope you understand." I read it once, then again, then a third time. Explore other options. Such a clean phrase. Such a polite Phrase. Such a cowardly phrase. It sounded like something written by a corporate consultant trying to soften bad news during a company layoff. Explore other options. Not "I'm unhappy." Not "I want to break up." Not even "I met someone else." Just a vague statement that somehow managed to be insulting and selfish at the same time. I sat frozen for nearly 5 minutes. Outside my office window, traffic moved normally. People crossed the street. Life continued. But inside my chest, something was quietly collapsing. Then another emotion appeared. Not sadness. Not anger. Clarity. Because suddenly, I understood exactly what Ethan was asking. He wasn't ending our relationship. He was putting me on hold. He wanted the freedom to investigate whether something better existed while keeping me safely parked in the background. His backup plan, his safety net, his emergency exit. And somehow I was supposed to be grateful for his honesty. I typed my response. Short, simple, direct. Explore a way. Then I put my phone down. What Ethan didn't know was that someone else had been slowly becoming part of my life for months. His best friend, Simon Bennett. Simon and I had never crossed any boundaries. Not once. Most of our interactions happened online. She would reply to my stories, ask about my photography hobby, recommend books, share funny memes, normal friendship stuff. At least, that's what I always assumed. But looking back, there were moments, tiny moments that suddenly looked different. Simon, Ethan is lucky to have someone as patient as you. Simon, did he even thank you for organizing that entire weekend trip? Simon, sometimes people don't realize how much someone does for them until it's gone. At the time, I interpreted those comments as concern from a friend, nothing more. Now they sounded different. Not manipulative, not calculated, just honest. As if Simon had been seeing something I refused to see. Over the next 2 days, Ethan remained mostly silent. No calls, no explanations, no attempts to reassure me. Apparently exploring required immediate dedication. By Friday evening, I was tired of sitting alone with my thoughts. I opened my messages, scrolled down, found Simon's name. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. Then I typed, "Random question. Are you free for dinner tonight?" 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then, "I thought you'd never ask." I stared at the screen. My heartbeat accelerated. And for the first time all week. I smiled. Dinner with Simon Bennett felt dangerously easy. That was the first thing that scared me. Not because he was Ethan's best friend, not because the timing was messy, but because for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to perform being lovable. Simon listened, really listened. When I talked, he didn't check his phone. When I joked, he laughed like he meant it. When I went quiet, he didn't rush to fill the silence. We sat in a small Italian restaurant downtown, tucked into a corner booth beneath warm yellow lights. And somehow, 4 hours disappeared. At one point, Simon looked at me across the table and said softly, "You know he expected you to wait." I looked down at my glass. I know. He thought you'd just sit there while he figured out whether he could do better. The words should have hurt. Instead, they made me breathe easier. Because someone else saw it? Someone else understood. I didn't have to explain why Ethan's message felt so humiliating. Simon already knew. After dinner, we walked along the river. The night air was cool, and the city lights trembled on the water like broken stars. When Simon reached for my hand, he paused first, like he was asking without words. I let him take it. That small moment felt more respectful than anything Ethan had given me in months. By the end of the night, Simon kissed me outside my apartment building. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. It was careful, certain, and it felt like something inside me had been waiting to wake up. The weekend passed in a blur. Coffee, long walks, inside jokes, quiet conversations that lasted until 2 a.m. Ethan didn't call, didn't text, didn't ask if I was okay. I assumed he was busy conducting his little market research. Then Monday came, and with it, the explosion. Simon posted a photo on Instagram. Just the two of us at a brewery, sitting shoulder to shoulder, smiling like people who had forgotten the world was watching. His caption was simple. "Well, this is nice." 20 minutes later, my phone lit up. Ethan. Then again. A screenshot of the story appeared in our chat. "What is this? Are you with Simon? Madison. Call me." The panic practically bled through the screen. The man who wanted to explore had returned from his expedition and discovered his backup plan had changed the locks. I waited an hour before replying. "You said you were exploring options." I decided to do the same. His response came as a voice note. I didn't even need to listen to all of it to understand. Betrayal, confusion, accusation. How could I do this? How could Simon do this? Simon was supposed to be his best friend. I was supposed to be his girlfriend. Waiting. Available. Paused. When I finally called him, Ethan answered on the first ring. "Are you serious right now?" he snapped. I stayed calm. "You told me to explore other options." "I didn't mean my best friend." "You didn't give me a list of approved options." "That's disgusting." "Madison." "No," I said quietly. "What's disgusting is asking me to wait while you test whether I'm worth choosing." There was silence. Then he said the sentence that told me everything. I only needed a little time. No apology. No regret. Just frustration that his plan hadn't worked. 2 nights later, Ethan showed up at my apartment, unannounced. I was cooking dinner with Simon when the doorbell rang and I saw Ethan on the security camera. My body went cold. Simon stood beside me. "Open it," he said. "Don't let him think he can control your home by standing outside it." So I opened the door. Ethan's eyes went from me to Simon. His face twisted. "What is he doing here?" I folded my arms. "This is my apartment. We were supposed to live together. We looked at places. We didn't sign anything." His jaw tightened. "You replaced me in a week." Simon stepped forward. Calm but firm. "No. You discarded her. You told her she was an option. And she decided she deserved to be a priority. Ethan turned on him. You were my friend. Simon's expression hardened. And I listened to you talk for months about getting bored. About wanting to see what else was out there. About that woman from yoga class you wanted to ask out. Ethan went pale. There it was. The missing piece. The truth he hadn't included in his noble little text. This hadn't been confusion. This had been preparation. He demanded the boxes he'd left at my place. I told him to text me a time, and I'd leave them outside. He wasn't coming in. The next morning, the smear campaign started. Mutual friends messaged me. Ethan said, you dumped him for Simon, out of nowhere. He said he just needed space. That's cold. Madison. I sent each of them the same screenshot. Ethan's original text. I need to explore other options. No explanation. No paragraph. Just proof. Most people understood immediately. But Ethan's closest supporters didn't stop. Then came the dirty trick. An apartment leasing office called me. Someone claiming to be connected to me had tried to continue an application Ethan and I had once discussed. They needed my personal financial details. Thankfully, the leasing agent thought something felt wrong and called to verify. That was the moment my heartbreak became something sharper. Ethan wasn't just embarrassed. He was dangerous. And I realized I couldn't simply move on. I needed to end this. Permanently. The moment I realized Ethan might be willing to interfere with my finances, something changed inside me. Until then, I had treated everything as the messy aftermath of a breakup, a painful misunderstanding, a wounded ego, a man struggling to accept consequences. But after the apartment incident, I began seeing a pattern. Every time Ethan failed to regain control, he escalated. And unfortunately, he wasn't doing it alone. The newest player in the drama was his older sister, Rachel Reynolds. Rachel had always been fiercely protective of Ethan. Protective wasn't even the right word. Possessive was closer. From the beginning of our relationship, she had acted as though Ethan could do no wrong. If he forgot a birthday, it was because he was busy. If he hurt someone's feelings, it was because they were too sensitive. If he made a mistake, someone else was responsible. In Rachel's world, Ethan was permanently innocent, which meant I was now permanently guilty. The first voicemail arrived on a Thursday afternoon. I listened to it while sitting in my car after work. Madison, I don't know what game you're playing, but you've embarrassed my brother enough. You need to stop. Delete. The second voicemail came the next day, then another and another. Each one became more aggressive, more emotional, more detached from reality. I saved every single message. Not because I planned to use them, at least not yet, but because something in my gut told me this wasn't over. Simon agreed. One evening we were sitting on my couch, reviewing another bizarre voicemail when he looked at me and said, "They're panicking." "What do you mean?" "They expected guilt to work." I frowned. "They expected you to feel bad enough to come back. When that failed, they tried pressure. When pressure failed, they tried manipulation. And now," he gave a humorless smile, "now they're getting desperate." As it turned out, he was right. The real escalation happened the following Monday. I arrived at work expecting a normal day. Instead, my director's assistant asked me to come to a conference room. Immediately, my stomach dropped. Inside the room sat my director and a representative from Human Resources. The sight alone made my pulse spike. For one terrifying moment, I thought someone in my family had died. Then, the HR representative spoke. "We've received an anonymous complaint regarding your workplace conduct." I felt my blood run cold. "What kind of complaint?" The HR representative exchanged a glance with my director. The answer was carefully worded. Claims of emotional instability, unprofessional behavior, harassment of a former romantic partner, questions regarding judgment and reliability. Every accusation was vague enough to sound serious. Every sentence was designed to trigger concern. Whoever wrote it knew exactly how corporate investigations worked. I sat silently for several seconds. Then I asked the obvious question. Do you believe it? My director immediately shook his head. No. The answer came so quickly that I nearly laughed from relief. He leaned forward. Madison, I've worked with you for 5 years. If these accusations were true, this meeting would look very different. The HR representative nodded. We still have to document that we reviewed the complaint. Of course. The meeting ended less than 15 minutes later. No disciplinary action. No investigation. No consequences. But as I walked back to my office, I felt something unfamiliar. Not fear. Anger. Real anger. Because somebody had attempted to attack my career, my livelihood, my future. Later that afternoon, my director quietly stopped by my office. He lowered his voice. I shouldn't share this. I looked up, but some of the wording in that complaint was unusual. He repeated several phrases from memory, corporate buzzwords, dramatic language, emotionally charged accusations disguised as professional concerns. I immediately recognized the style. Rachel. I couldn't prove it, but I knew, and for the first time, I stopped thinking about closure. Closure was for people acting in good faith. This wasn't about closure anymore. This was about ending a campaign. That night, Simon found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop. What are you doing? I turned the screen toward him. A folder, documents, screenshots, voicemails, evidence. His eyebrows rose. You've started organizing everything. I think it's time. He sat beside me. Time for what? I looked at the growing collection of proof, the original text, the frantic messages, the apartment incident, Rachel's voicemails, the HR complaint timeline, everything. Then I said the words that surprised even me. I'm done defending myself. A slow smile spread across Simon's face. Good. The opportunity arrived sooner than expected. About a week later, a formal envelope appeared in my mailbox. Heavy paper, embossed lettering. En invitation, I immediately recognized the names. Ethan's parents, their annual anniversary celebration, an event famous among their social circle. A gathering where appearances mattered more than oxygen. The invitation had obviously been prepared months before our breakup. I almost threw it away. Then curiosity got the better of me. I texted Ethan. Why did I receive this? His response arrived several minutes later. I told my parents not to bother removing you. Then, another message. Besides, you wouldn't show up. I stared at the screen. Another text appeared. It would be too embarrassing. I smiled. Not because it hurt, because it was useful. Ethan still thought he understood me. He still believed shame would keep me quiet. He still believed I wanted to hide. That assumption would become his biggest mistake. I showed Simon the conversation. His grin appeared instantly. Oh. We're going. We are absolutely going. I laughed for the first time all day. What exactly are you planning? His eyes sparkled. Nothing dramatic. Those words should have worried me. Instead, they made me excited. Over the next 2 weeks, we prepared carefully, methodically. Every screenshot was organized. Every voicemail was transcribed. Every message was dated and cataloged. The original Explore Other Options text became the starting point. Then came evidence regarding the yoga class woman. Then, Rachel's increasingly hostile messages. Then, documentation surrounding the anonymous workplace complaint, piece by piece. A complete timeline emerged. Not opinions, not accusation. Facts. Pure facts. Eventually, I built a private password-protected website containing everything. Clean, professional, impossible to argue with. One evening, after reviewing the finished timeline, Simon leaned back in his chair. That's devastating. I nodded. Good. The anniversary party arrived 3 weeks later. Simon and I spent the drive there listening to music and pretending we weren't nervous. The country club appeared ahead of us, glowing beneath golden evening lights. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Valids moved between guests. Laughter drifted through the warm summer air. I took a deep breath. Simon squeezed my hand. Ready. I looked at the building, at the place where Ethan expected me to hide. Then I smiled. Ready. Together, we walked toward the entrance. Neither of us knew that before the night ended, the entire narrative Ethan and his family had built would begin collapsing around them. The moment Simon and I entered the country club, I felt the atmosphere change. Not dramatically, not enough for strangers to notice, but enough. Heads turned, conversations briefly paused. A few whispers floated through the room before quickly disappearing. People knew who I was. More importantly, people knew who Simon was. And seeing us together clearly wasn't what they expected. Across the ballroom, I spotted Ethan standing beside his parents. His reaction was immediate. The color drained from his face. For a second, he looked genuinely stunned, as though some part of him had convinced itself I would never actually come. His mother wasn't much better. The expression she gave me could have frozen glass. His father, however, was trapped by years of social etiquette. So when our eyes met, he gave me a stiff nod. I returned it politely. Then Simon and I continued walking. No confrontation. No scene. Nothing dramatic. That was the point. The most powerful person in the room isn't usually the loudest. It's the person who doesn't need to raise their voice. For the next hour, we mingled. We talked to guests, complimented the venue, congratulated Ethan's parents on their anniversary. We acted exactly like two people with absolutely nothing to hide. Meanwhile, I could practically feel Ethan watching us from across the room, waiting, expecting, hoping I would create some kind of public spectacle. Instead, I smiled, laughed, enjoyed myself, and waited. Because Ethan wasn't my target, not really. The true target was reputation, specifically the false narrative that had been protecting him for months. Eventually, I spotted the person I'd been looking for. Mr. Scott, one of Ethan's father's oldest business associates, a respected figure, well-connected, observant, and perhaps most importantly, someone whose version of events tended to become everyone's version of events. The opportunity arrived shortly after the anniversary toast. Mr. Scott and Ethan's father were standing together near the bar, talking quietly. I glanced at Simon. He gave me a small nod. Go. I walked over. Good evening, gentlemen. Both men turned. Mr. Scott smiled politely. Ethan's father looked considerably less comfortable. Madison, he said, I just wanted to thank you for the invitation. I said calmly. His expression tightened. I appreciate being included. Of course. Then I continued. Actually, there's something I've been meaning to clear up. Mr. Scott's interest immediately sharpened. I could almost see the curiosity forming. I kept my tone pleasant, professional, controlled. There's been a rather unfortunate story circulating regarding my breakup with Ethan. Neither man interrupted. I've apparently been portrayed as the villain. Still no interruption, so I continued. I was accused of abandoning him, betraying him, even harassing him. Mr. Scott's eyebrows rose. Now I had his attention. I found that misunderstandings are easiest to resolve when everyone has access to the facts. Then I pulled out my phone. Nothing flashy, nothing theatrical. I simply opened the website, the timeline, the evidence, the truth. I put together a brief summary. Both men leaned closer. I handed over the phone, and then I stayed quiet. Because the evidence didn't need help, the first thing they saw was Ethan's message. The infamous message. I need to explore other options. Timestamp included. Undeniable. Then came the screenshots regarding the woman from Ethan's yoga class. The messages that made it painfully obvious he had already been interested elsewhere before sending that text. Then Rachel's voicemails. Then the timeline surrounding the suspicious apartment application. Then the anonymous workplace complaint. One fact after another. One piece of evidence after another. No emotional commentary. No exaggeration. Just reality. As they scrolled, I watched the expressions change. Confusion, understanding, embarrassment, and finally something that looked remarkably close to disappointment, especially on Ethan's father's face. Mr. Scott finished reading first. Slowly handed the phone back. Then looked toward the opposite side of the ballroom where Ethan stood. The look in his eyes said everything. He understood exactly what had happened. Every accusation, every lie, every attempt to rewrite history, all of it. Exposed. Quietly. Completely. I slipped my phone back into my purse. Anyway, I said pleasantly, I simply wanted to clear the air. Nobody spoke, so I smiled. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Then I walked away. That was it. No shouting. No confrontation. No public humiliation. The entire interaction lasted less than 5 minutes. But sometimes 5 minutes is enough. Simon was waiting near our table. How did it go? He asked. I glanced toward the bar. Mr. Scott was already speaking to another guest. I smiled. Perfectly. We stayed another 30 minutes. Long enough to remain polite. Short enough to avoid unnecessary drama. Then we left. Hand in hand. The real fallout began after we were gone. Exactly as predicted, Mr. Scott didn't spread rumors. He spread facts, which turned out to be far more damaging. Within days, people throughout their social circle knew the complete story. Not Ethan's version. Not Rachel's version. The documented version. The version supported by screenshots, timestamps, and evidence. The version nobody could successfully challenge. For months, Ethan had relied on a carefully crafted narrative. Now that narrative was gone, and without it, his actions looked exactly as selfish as they actually were. Through mutual acquaintances, bits and pieces of information eventually reached us. Ethan's parents were furious. Not because of what Ethan had done, but because everyone now knew about it. Their carefully maintained image had taken a significant hit. Rachel became noticeably quieter. The anonymous workplace complaint was never mentioned again. Nor were the apartment application issues. The attacks simply stopped. As if someone had finally realized the game was unwinnable. Several months later, we heard that Ethan had accepted a position in another city. Apparently, a fresh start seemed easier than dealing with the consequences of his reputation. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. By then, my life had already moved forward. The most important part of the story wasn't what happened to Ethan. It was what happened to me. 6 months after the anniversary party, Simon and I signed a lease together. A beautiful apartment overlooking the river. The same river where we'd taken that first walk after dinner. Some evenings we sat on the balcony, watching the city lights reflect on the water. And occasionally, usually after a long day, I'd think about that original text message. The one that had shattered my plans. The one that felt devastating at the time. Funny how life works. because losing Ethan turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. His entitlement forced me to see my own value. His selfishness taught me self-respect. His betrayal pushed me towards someone who never treated me like an option. In the end, the greatest revenge wasn't exposing the truth. It wasn't watching his lies collapse. It wasn't seeing consequences finally catch up with him. The greatest revenge was building a life so much better than the one he offered me that eventually I stopped thinking about revenge altogether. Ethan wanted to explore other options. He did, and so did I. The difference was that I found something real.